Lucas had learned to appreciate quiet places, the kind where nothing unexpected ever happened. The transit station on the edge of the city wasn't exactly quiet, but it had a rhythm he understood. Distant engine hums, soft announcements in three languages, the occasional frustrated traveler arguing with a ticket interface that refused to cooperate. It was predictable. Predictable meant safe, and safe meant he didn't have to think. He stood near a vending unit that claimed to serve nutritionally optimized beverages, staring at the glowing options as if one of them might suddenly become interesting. They never did. He pressed a button anyway, more out of habit than desire, and watched the machine struggle to produce something that looked vaguely like coffee. He had just taken a sip, regretting it instantly, when the air around him shifted. It wasn't something obvious, no alarms, no sudden noise. Just a subtle change, like the world had leaned slightly in a direction it wasn't supposed to. Lucas frowned, lowering the cup. He had felt that before. Not here, not in a place like this, but somewhere far louder, far more dangerous. He turned. At first he thought she was just another traveler, tall, composed, dressed in a way that didn't quite match any uniform he recognized. Then he noticed her ears. Long, elegant, unmistakably alien. They caught the station's artificial light in a way that made them almost seem deliberate, like a detail someone had added after everything else was finished. She was looking directly at him. Lucas blinked once, then glanced over his shoulder to make sure she wasn't staring at someone else. When he looked back, she was still there, still focused on him with an intensity that felt misplaced. "Okay," he muttered under his breath, lifting his cup again. "Either I forgot something important, or I'm about to be recruited into something illegal." She took a step forward, then another, and then without warning, her composure broke. Tears, not subtle ones, not the kind someone tries to hide. These were immediate, overwhelming, completely unrestrained. Her shoulders trembled as if something inside her had finally given up holding itself together. Lucas froze, halfway through another regrettable sip of his drink. "Right," he said slowly, lowering the cup again. "Definitely illegal." She stopped a few steps in front of him, close enough now that he could see the details, her eyes sharp and focused despite the tears, her posture still disciplined even as she struggled to breathe steadily, and then she spoke his name. Not a question, not hesitation, certainty. Lucas. He felt something tighten in his chest, something he didn't immediately recognize. He set the cup down on the nearest surface, suddenly very aware that the situation had shifted from mildly strange to deeply uncomfortable. "I'm going to need you to explain how you know that," he said, gesturing vaguely at himself. "Because I don't remember signing up for anything that ends with me being dramatically approached in a train station." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she took another step forward, her expression caught somewhere between relief and disbelief, as if she had reached the end of a very long journey and wasn't entirely convinced it was over. "I found you," she said, her voice unsteady but clear. Lucas tilted his head slightly. "That's, usually how conversations start, yes." "I found you," she repeated as if the words themselves carried more meaning than he was willing to acknowledge. He let out a quiet breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I'm not saying you didn't. I'm just saying I don't recall being lost." That earned him a reaction, though not the one he expected. A small, almost incredulous sound escaped her, something between a laugh and a sob. It caught him off guard enough that he paused, studying her more carefully now. There was nothing uncertain about her presence. Even in this state, she carried herself like someone used to command, to control, to being listened to. The tears didn't weaken that impression. If anything, they made it more unsettling. "I have been searching for you," she said, her voice steadier now, though her eyes still glistened. "For 15 years. Lucas stared at her. Then he glanced around the station, as if expecting someone to jump out and explain the situation. 15, he repeated. "That's, a very specific number." She nodded. "Okay," he continued, holding up a hand. "Let's assume for a moment that you're serious. 15 years is a long time. That's commitment. That's concerning levels of commitment, actually. Are you sure you have the right person?" Her expression didn't change. Lucas exhaled slowly. "Right. Of course you are. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The station continued around them, unaware, indifferent. A distant announcement echoed overhead, something about departures and delays, none of it relevant to whatever was happening here. He shifted his weight, trying to find some version of the situation that made sense. Listen, he said finally, his tone softer now. I'm not trying to be difficult. It's just, I don't know you. And I feel like if someone's been looking for me for 15 years, I should at least remember why. Her gaze didn't waver. You don't remember, she said. It wasn't a question. Lucas hesitated. There was something in the way she said it, something that reached past the surface of the conversation and brushed against memories he had spent years carefully avoiding. He gave a small, uneasy smile. Well, he said, that narrows it down to about half my life. The silence between them didn't last long, but it stretched enough for Lucas to become painfully aware of every small detail. The hum of the station's energy grid, the distant clatter of arriving transports, and the fact that his drink was still sitting behind him, like a bad decision waiting to be remembered. You really don't remember, she said again, softer this time. Lucas scratched his cheek, glancing down briefly before meeting her eyes again. Look, I forget passwords, birthdays, and occasionally why I walked into a room. But this feels bigger. So either I took a very hard hit to the head, or you've got the wrong guy with a very average face. You are not average, she replied immediately. He blinked. That's nice of you, but I'm pretty sure my mirror disagrees. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wasn't sure how to respond to that. For a moment it looked like she might argue, but instead she took a slow breath, steadying herself. When she spoke again, her tone shifted, more controlled, more deliberate. My name is Reva, she said. Commander Reva of the 3rd Interstellar Coalition Fleet. Lucas nodded slowly. That sounds very official. Also sounds like something I should have heard about on the news, which I definitely didn't. You wouldn't, she replied. Of course I wouldn't, he echoed. Why would I know about a coalition fleet operating somewhere in space? That would make too much sense. There was a flicker of something in her expression. Confusion, maybe, or mild disbelief. Lucas had the impression she wasn't used to being answered like this. 15 years ago, she continued, ignoring his tone, there was an evacuation on the outer colonies near the Kareth Expanse. Lucas felt his shoulders tighten slightly. He didn't react outwardly. He had learned how to do that a long time ago. But something in the words, evacuation, outer colonies, pressed against a part of his memory that was carefully sealed off. He shrugged lightly. There were a lot of evacuations. War tends to create those. This one was different. They all say that, he muttered. Reva took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. You were there. Lucas let out a small breath through his nose. Statistically speaking, that's possible. I was in a lot of places I'd rather not revisit. You stayed behind. That made him pause. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the certainty behind them. Lucas tilted his head slightly, studying her again. Okay, let's say I did. That still doesn't explain why you've been tracking me across the galaxy like I owe you money. Her expression tightened, not in anger, but in something closer to frustration. You carried people, she said. You carried the wounded when others were retreating. You refused extraction. Lucas blinked once. Then he exhaled, looking away for a brief second before returning his gaze to her. Yeah, he said slowly. That does sound like something I'd do. Terrible decision-making has always been one of my strengths. This was not a joke, she replied. I know, he said. That's why I'm making one. The tension lingered, but something had shifted now. The edges of the conversation were sharper, more defined. The vague confusion from before was starting to take shape, forming something Lucas wasn't entirely sure he wanted to recognize. Reva watched him closely. You were a medic. Still am, he said automatically. Then after a brief pause, technically, less running through explosions these days, more paperwork, much safer, much more boring. You carried civilians through active fire zones. Lucas gave a small shrug. Comes with the job. You stayed after your unit was ordered to withdraw. Orders get flexible when people are bleeding. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if she was trying to understand him on a level beyond his words. "You do remember," she said. Lucas hesitated. There it was again, that pressure against his thoughts, that slow, unwelcome pull of memory. He could almost see flashes of it now. Smoke, noise, the weight of bodies that were too still, too quiet. He forced a small smile. "I remember enough to know it wasn't my best day." Reva didn't return the smile. "It was the most important day of my life." The words landed harder than he expected. Lucas shifted his weight, suddenly aware that the conversation had crossed into something he couldn't easily deflect. "Okay," he said more quietly now. "That's a lot of pressure to put on one day." "You saved lives." "I tried," he corrected. "You succeeded." He shook his head slightly. "You don't know that." "I do." Lucas opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out immediately. There was something in her voice, something unshakable, that made arguing feel pointless. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder at the station again, as if hoping the normal world would reassert itself and interrupt whatever this was. It didn't. When he turned back, Reva was still there, still watching him like he was the answer to a question she had been asking for years. He sighed softly. "All right," he said. "Let's say I believe you. Let's say I was there, and I did all the things you're saying. That still leaves one very important detail." She waited. Lucas gestured lightly between them. "Why me?" he asked. "Out of everyone on that battlefield, out of every medic, every soldier, why spend 15 years looking for one guy who doesn't even remember you?" For the first time since the conversation began, Reva hesitated. It was brief, almost imperceptible. But Lucas saw it, and in that moment he realized something. Whatever answer she was about to give, he wasn't sure he was ready to hear it. Reva didn't answer immediately, and for a brief moment Lucas thought, hoped, that she might change her mind, say it was all a misunderstanding, walk away, and let the strange gravity of the situation dissolve back into the station's ordinary noise. Instead, she inhaled slowly, steadying herself in a way that felt practiced, as if she had rehearsed this moment countless times and still wasn't certain she could get through it. "You carried me," she said. Lucas frowned. "That narrows it down to several possibilities," he replied. "I carried a lot of people. It was kind of the whole job description." Her gaze didn't waver. "You carried me." There was something different in the way she said it this time. Not insistence, not urgency, certainty. Lucas opened his mouth, ready with another deflection, another joke to soften the weight of her words, but it didn't come. Instead, something in his chest tightened again, sharper now, pulling at fragments of memory he had spent years carefully burying. He rubbed his temple. "Okay," he said slowly, "you're going to need to be a little more specific, because right now, my brain is helpfully offering me a highlight reel of bad decisions, and none of them come with names attached." Reva stepped closer, just enough that he could see the fine details of her expression, the tension around her eyes, the way she held herself as if bracing against something unseen. "I was a child," she said. "Small. Injured. I could not walk." Lucas froze. For a second, the station faded. Not completely, but enough that it felt distant, like background noise behind something louder, older. "I don't," he started, then stopped. Images flickered at the edges of his thoughts. Smoke thick enough to choke on. The metallic taste of blood. The constant, relentless sound of impact. Explosions. Weapons fire. Structures collapsing under pressure they were never meant to withstand. And weight. Not heavy. Not like the soldiers in full gear. Light. Too light. "You," he said quietly, then shook his head, trying to push the images back. "There were a lot of civilians. You checked my breathing 3 times, Reva continued, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. "You kept speaking to me, even when I did not understand your language." Lucas let out a short, humorless laugh. "That sounds like me. Talking to people who don't understand me has always been a strong skill. You were afraid I would stop breathing if you stopped speaking." That wiped the faint smile from his face. He looked at her again, really looked this time, not just at the uniform or the presence or the impossible situation, but at her, at the shape of her features, the structure of her face, the way her eyes held a familiarity he couldn't quite place. And then something shifted. A fragment, small but sharp, pushed its way through. A corridor filled with smoke, a child in his arms, her skin pale beneath the grime, her eyes wide but unfocused. He had been talking. He remembered that now, not because he expected her to understand, but because silence felt dangerous. Silence meant stopping, and stopping meant... Lucas blinked hard, the memory snapping back into place like a piece of something he hadn't realized was broken. "No," he said under his breath. Reva didn't move. Lucas took a step back, running a hand through his hair. "No, that's not... You carried me to the transport," she said. "The last one." He shook his head again, but there was less certainty in it now. There were dozens of people. I couldn't. You lifted me into the air," she continued, her voice softer now, but no less precise. "You told someone to take me. You did not wait to see if they listened." Lucas swallowed. That part felt too real. He remembered the urgency, the desperation of those final moments. The transports were leaving, one by one, and every second mattered. There hadn't been time to check. There hadn't been time to be sure. You just moved. You just acted, and hoped it was enough. "I thought," he started, then stopped. The words caught in his throat. Reva watched him carefully. "You thought we all died?" Lucas let out a slow breath. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That was kind of the assumption." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, unexpectedly, Lucas huffed out a small laugh, shaking his head. "Great," he muttered. "So not only did I survive, but now I get to find out I've been wrong about something for 15 years. That's comforting." Reva tilted her head slightly. "You are joking again." "It's either that or have a dramatic emotional breakdown in the middle of a transit station," he replied. "And I'm pretty sure that spot's already taken." For a brief second, something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, but close. Lucas noticed it, and for some reason, that made everything feel even more surreal. He gestured vaguely at her. "So, you're telling me that you were that kid, the one I..." "Yes. And you grew up, joined an interstellar fleet, became a commander, and then decided to spend 15 years looking for a guy who doesn't even remember your face?" "Yes." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "All right," he said. "That's a lot to process." Reva didn't respond. Lucas exhaled slowly, glancing down at the floor before looking back up at her. "I didn't think anyone made it," he admitted. "Not from that last group. I figured..." He trailed off, shaking his head again. "Doesn't matter what I figured." "It matters," she said. He gave a small, tired smile. "Yeah, turns out it does." Another pause settled between them, but this one felt different, less sharp, less uncertain. Lucas studied her again, the pieces finally starting to align. "All right," he said after a moment. "Let's assume I believe all of this, which, by the way, is a big assumption. But let's go with it." Reva waited. He crossed his arms lightly, tilting his head. "You found me," he said, "after 15 years. Across however many systems you said." "Yes. And now you're standing here, crying in a train station, telling me I saved your life." "Yes." Lucas nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "New question." She blinked once. "What exactly do you expect me to do with that?" Reva didn't answer immediately, and this time the silence felt heavier, as if the question itself had shifted something fundamental between them. Lucas watched her carefully, half expecting another emotional reaction, half hoping for something simpler, something that didn't feel like it carried 15 years of weight. "I do not expect anything," she said at last. Lucas raised an eyebrow. "That's suspicious." Her expression flickered with confusion. "Suspicious?" "Yeah," he said, nodding. "When someone travels across the galaxy for 15 years and then says they expect nothing, that's usually the part where I check if my wallet is still there." She glanced down at his hands, then back at his face, clearly trying to understand whether he was serious. "I do not want your currency," she said. "That's good," Lucas replied, "because I don't have much of it." For a brief moment, the tension loosened, just slightly. Reva exhaled, as if adjusting to the rhythm of his words, to the way he kept pushing against the gravity of the situation with humor. I wanted to find you, she continued, to know you survived. Lucas tilted his head. That's it? She hesitated. No, she admitted. Not entirely. Of course not, he muttered. That would have been too easy. Reva straightened slightly, her posture shifting back into something more formal, more controlled. I wanted to tell you that your actions mattered. Lucas looked away for a second, his jaw tightening just a little. Yeah, he said quietly. That's not usually how it works. It is how it worked, she replied firmly. He gave a small shake of his head, glancing back at her. You don't understand. Back then, you didn't get to know the outcome. You did what you could, and then you moved on. Or you didn't move on, but you pretended you did. Either way, there wasn't a follow-up report that said, congratulations, the person you carried through an active war zone turned out fine. Reva stepped closer again, her voice steady. Then consider this your report. Lucas let out a short breath that might have been a laugh. 15 years late, but I guess I'll take it. The words came out lighter than he felt, because underneath it, something was shifting. He could feel it now, clearer than before. That old assumption, the quiet, heavy belief that everything he had done back then had ultimately meant nothing, was starting to crack, and he didn't know what to do with that. Reva studied him, her gaze sharp in a way that suggested she was seeing more than he was saying. You still believe it did not matter, she said. Lucas shrugged, though the motion felt less convincing than usual. It mattered in the moment. That's how these things work. It mattered after the moment, she insisted. He looked at her again, something flickering in his expression. You're one person. I am proof. He opened his mouth, then stopped. That word, proof, hung between them, heavier than anything she had said so far. Lucas rubbed his face, exhaling slowly. You're very persistent, you know that? I had 15 years to practice. That explains it, he said. I usually only give people about 5 minutes before I start ignoring them. She tilted her head slightly. You have not ignored me. Give it time, he replied automatically. But there was no real edge to it. Reva seemed to notice that too. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The station continued around them, people passing by, unaware of the quiet, impossible conversation unfolding just a few steps away. Then Reva did something unexpected. She reached into a small device attached to her wrist, a piece of technology Lucas hadn't noticed before, and activated it with a subtle movement. A faint hum filled the air, followed by a soft projection of light. Lucas blinked. Okay, he said, taking a step back. Now we're definitely in illegal territory. It is a memory archive, she said. That's worse, he replied. That sounds like something that's going to emotionally damage me. The projection stabilized between them. At first, it was just fragments, blurred images, distorted audio, like something pulled from a damaged recording. Then it sharpened. Smoke, fire, a corridor collapsing in on itself. Lucas stiffened. I do not show this lightly, Reva said quietly. Yeah, he murmured. I would hope not. The image shifted. A figure moved through the chaos, fast, unsteady, carrying something. Someone. Lucas felt his breath catch. That's not, he started, but it was. He recognized the way the figure moved, the uneven pace, the way he leaned slightly to one side under the weight he was carrying. He recognized himself. You recorded this? He asked, his voice quieter now. It was taken by a drone unit during the evacuation, Reva said. I found it years later. Lucas stared at the projection, at the version of himself he barely remembered, at the small figure in his arms. Reva, you kept this for 15 years, he said. Yes. He let out a slow breath, shaking his head slightly. That's not normal behavior. I am aware, she replied. That almost made him smile. Almost. The projection continued for a few more seconds before fading out, leaving the air between them empty again. Lucas stood there, silent. Then he rubbed the back of his neck, exhaling. Okay, he said. I'm going to need a minute. Reva nodded. Take the time you need. He glanced at her, then back at where the projection had been. 15 years, he repeated. Yes. Lucas let out a quiet breath. Then, despite everything, despite the weight of it all, a small, dry smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. You know, he said, most people just send a message. Reva's lips moved slightly, and this time, the reaction was unmistakable. A small smile. Not wide, not fully formed, but real. I did not know where to send it, she said. Lucas exhaled through his nose. Fair point. My forwarding address during that time was complicated. That is one way to describe it, she replied. He glanced at her. You know about that too, I assume. Yes. Of course you do, he muttered. You've got the full collection. Memories, records, probably a very detailed file somewhere labeled The Idiot Who Wouldn't Leave. Reva's expression shifted again, more serious now. You were captured. Lucas didn't answer immediately. The word sat there, heavier than anything else they had said so far. Captured, not injured, not lost. Captured. Yeah, he said after a moment, his voice quieter. That part wasn't in the highlight reel, I guess. It was not easy to find information, Reva continued. Your records were incomplete, fragmented. Some were intentionally erased. Lucas gave a short, humorless laugh. That sounds about right. Governments love doing that. Makes everything nice and confusing later. I searched through coalition archives, human military databases, independent data traders, she said as if listing them made the process feel smaller. It took years to confirm you were still alive. He looked at her again, this time with something closer to disbelief than confusion. You really went all in on this, he said. Yes. No backup plan, he asked. No moment where you thought, maybe I should just not dedicate a decade and a half to finding one very forgettable human? You are not forgettable. He let out a quiet breath, shaking his head. You keep saying that. It remains true. Lucas shifted his weight, glancing off to the side again. The station was still moving, still alive with people who had no idea that a conversation like this was even possible. It felt strange, standing here, talking about things that belonged to a completely different life. So, he said slowly, you found out I survived, that I didn't just disappear after that evacuation? Yes. And then what? He asked. You just kept going, following records, chasing rumors, hoping I'd still be around? Yes. He stared at her for a moment. Then he nodded once. That's, impressive. Slightly concerning, but impressive. I was not concerned, she said. You probably should have been, he replied. I'm not exactly worth that kind of effort. Reva stepped closer again, her gaze steady. You are the reason I am alive. Lucas let out a slow breath, his usual deflection slower to come this time. That's a very dramatic way to put it, he said. It is an accurate way, she replied. He hesitated. Then, as if trying to regain some balance, he gestured lightly with his hand. All right, let's say I accept that. Let's say I was in the right place at the right time and did the right thing. That still doesn't explain why you're here now. I told you, she said, to find you. No, he said, shaking his head. That's why you started, not why you're standing here right now. Reva paused. It wasn't hesitation like before. It was something more deliberate, as if she was choosing her words carefully, aware that this part mattered more than the rest. I came to repay you, she said. Lucas blinked. Then he laughed. Not loudly, not mockingly, but genuinely surprised. Repay me, he repeated. Okay, that's new. I owe you my life, she said. You don't, he replied immediately. I do. No, he said again, more firmly this time. You really don't. Reva frowned slightly. You do not accept it. I don't even understand it, Lucas said. Repay me how? You're a commander in some interstellar fleet I've never heard of. I fix minor injuries and argue with vending machines that refuse to give me decent coffee. There's no version of this where repayment makes sense. There is, she insisted. All right, he said, crossing his arms. Explain it to me, because right now it sounds like you're offering to solve a problem I don't have. You lost years, she said. He stilled. The words were simple, but they landed differently. You were captured, she continued, You endured conditions no one should endure, because you stayed. Lucas looked at her, something tightening in his expression again. That's not your responsibility, he said. It is connected to me. It's connected to a lot of things, he replied. War, bad decisions, poor timing. Take your pick. You stayed for us. I stayed because that's what I did, he said. That's what medics do. You chose not to leave. He exhaled slowly. Yeah, and I'd probably make the same choice again. That doesn't mean anyone owes me anything for it. Reva studied him, her gaze searching. You do not value what you did, she said. Lucas shrugged, though it felt less certain now. I value that I got people out. That's enough. It is not enough, she said quietly. He met her eyes. It is for me. The words hung there, firm but not harsh. For a moment Reva didn't respond. Then she stepped even closer, her voice softer now, but no less steady. I did not spend 15 years searching for you because of obligation, she said. I did it because you mattered. Lucas felt something shift again, not as sharp as before, not as overwhelming, but there, present. He looked at her, really looked this time, not as a stranger, not as a mystery, but as someone who had carried something he didn't even realize he had left behind. He exhaled slowly. Then after a brief pause, he tilted his head slightly. Okay, he said. Hypothetically, if I were to accept this whole repayment idea, Reva's attention sharpened immediately. Lucas raised a hand. Hypothetically. She nodded once. He considered it for a moment. Then a small, familiar hint of humor returned to his expression. Well, he said, I've always wanted a better cup of coffee. Reva stared at him for a moment, as if trying to determine whether he was serious. You want coffee, she said carefully. Lucas nodded. Yes, a revolutionary concept, I know, but ideally something that doesn't taste like it was filtered through a damaged engine. She blinked once. That is your request for repayment. Well, I'm easing you into it, he replied. We can escalate later if you insist on overachieving. There was a brief pause, and then, unexpectedly, Reva turned her wrist device slightly and tapped a sequence across its surface. A faint pulse of light flickered, followed by a soft chime. Lucas narrowed his eyes. I feel like I should be concerned. You said you wanted better coffee, she replied. I did, he said. I just didn't expect orbital support. A few seconds later, something hummed overhead. Lucas looked up. A small, sleek drone, far too advanced to belong to anything in the station, descended with quiet precision. It hovered between them, projecting a subtle field that kept it perfectly steady despite the movement around it. Lucas stared. Okay, he said slowly. That's not normal. The drone extended a compact compartment, and with a soft click, it opened. Inside sat a cup. Not a vending machine cup, not synthetic. Real material. Steam curled gently upward, carrying a scent that made Lucas freeze for an entirely different reason. He inhaled. That smells illegal, he said. It is not illegal, Reva replied. It should be, he muttered. The drone adjusted slightly, presenting the cup toward him. Lucas hesitated for a fraction of a second, then reached out and took it. It was warm, perfectly warm. He looked at it, then at her, then back at the cup. If this explodes, he said, I'm going to be very disappointed. It will not explode. That's what people always say before things explode. Still, he took a careful sip, and then he paused, completely. His expression shifted in a way Reva hadn't seen before. Not guarded, not deflecting. Just still. Lucas lowered the cup slowly, staring at it like it had just personally offended him. I have wasted years of my life, he said quietly. Reva tilted her head. It is acceptable? He looked up at her. Acceptable? This is what coffee is supposed to be. Do you understand what you've done? I have fulfilled your request. You've ruined every other drink I will ever have, he said. That vending machine over there? It's dead to me now. Reva glanced at the machine. It appears functional. Not to me, he replied. For a moment, the weight of everything else seemed to step back, replaced by something simpler, Something almost normal. Lucas took another sip, slower this time. Then he exhaled. Okay, he said. That's a strong start. I am glad it meets your expectations. Oh, it exceeds them, he said, which is concerning, because now I'm wondering what else you consider normal. Reva watched him carefully, her expression softer now, though still attentive. You are different than I expected, she said. Lucas raised an eyebrow. That's rarely a good sign. You are not what the records described. He smirked slightly. Let me guess. They made me sound impressive. They described you as disciplined, focused, unyielding. Lucas nodded slowly. Yeah, that sounds like someone I used to know. You are not unyielding, she said. He took another sip, considering that. No, he admitted. Turns out life has a way of adjusting that. Reva was quiet for a moment. Then more carefully, she spoke again. You joke often. It helps, he said. With what? He looked at the cup in his hand, the steam still rising from it. With not thinking too much about things I probably shouldn't revisit, he replied. Her gaze didn't leave him. And now? Lucas exhaled slowly. Now I don't really have that option, do I? The words weren't heavy, but they weren't light either. Reva stepped slightly closer, her voice quieter now. You do not have to face it alone. Lucas let out a small breath that might have been a laugh. Careful, he said. That's dangerously close to emotional support. She didn't react immediately. Is that a problem? He glanced at her, then shook his head slightly. No, just not something I'm used to. Reva nodded once, as if filing that away. For a moment they stood there again, but the silence had changed. It wasn't tense anymore. It wasn't uncertain. It was steady. Lucas took another sip, then looked at her again. So, he said, you've got advanced drones, interstellar fleets, memory archives, and apparently access to the best coffee in existence. Yes, he nodded. And you spent 15 years tracking me down. Yes. He studied her for a second, then tilted his head slightly. You're not going to leave after this, are you? Reva didn't hesitate this time. No. Lucas sighed softly, though there was no real resistance in it. All right, he said. Just so we're clear, this is a lot. I am aware. And I'm still figuring out how to process the fact that someone I don't remember has a better memory of me than I do. I remember because it mattered, she said. Lucas looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded just slightly. Yeah, he said. I'm starting to get that. He glanced down at the cup again, then back at her. And for the record, he added, if this is what repayment looks like, I might have to reconsider my position. Reva's expression shifted again, that same almost smile returning. Then I will continue, she said. Lucas raised the cup slightly in acknowledgement. Dangerous promise, he replied. Lucas didn't move for a while after that. The station kept breathing around them. Arrivals, departures, distant voices layered over mechanical announcements. But it all felt slightly out of place now, like a world continuing on a track that no longer quite aligned with his. He took another slow sip of the coffee, more out of habit than anything else, and exhaled. You know, he said, this is probably the strangest day I've had in a long time. Reva tilted her head slightly. Only today? He considered that. Okay, he admitted. Top 5. That is acceptable, she replied. Lucas gave a small, quiet laugh. It felt easier now. Not because everything made sense, it didn't, but because something inside him had stopped resisting it quite so hard. He looked at her again, more carefully this time, not as a question, not as a problem to solve, just as her. So, he said, shifting his weight slightly, you found me. You confirmed I exist, which I appreciate. You gave me the best coffee I've ever had, which I appreciate more. What happens now? Reva didn't answer immediately, but this time it wasn't hesitation, it was consideration. I remain, she said. Lucas nodded slowly. Yeah, I got that part. I do not intend to leave, she continued. Not yet. He studied her face for a moment, searching for something. Certainty, maybe, or doubt. He didn't find doubt. "Now, right," he said quietly. There was a time not very long ago when that answer would have made him uncomfortable, when the idea of someone staying, especially someone like her, carrying 15 years of memory and meaning, would have felt like too much. But now it felt different, not lighter, but clearer. He looked down at the cup in his hand, watching the last traces of steam fade into the air. "I spent a long time thinking that day didn't matter," he said. Reva didn't interrupt. Lucas let out a slow breath. "Not just that day. A lot of things. You do your job, you move on, and whatever happens after, it's not yours anymore." He glanced at her. "But apparently," he added, "that's not entirely true." "No," she said softly, "it is not." He gave a small nod, absorbing that. For a moment his expression shifted. Less guarded, less distant. "I don't remember your face," he admitted. "Not from back then." "I know. But I remember the feeling," he continued. "The urgency. The need to make sure you made it onto that transport." Reva's gaze softened. Lucas let out a quiet breath. "I thought I failed," he said. "I thought all of that, everything I did that day, it didn't change anything." "It changed everything," she replied. He looked at her again. This time he didn't argue. "Yeah," he said, "I'm starting to see that." The words settled between them, not heavy, not light, just real. Lucas shifted slightly, then glanced around the station again, as if seeing it properly for the first time since she had arrived. Everything looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. He took a final sip of the coffee, then looked back at her. "So," he said, "if you're staying, does that mean I'm going to have to get used to drones delivering beverages out of nowhere?" "If you wish," she replied. He smirked faintly. "I might. Could be a dangerous habit. I will ensure it is managed responsibly." "That's reassuring," he said. "I'd hate to become dependent on interstellar caffeine support." For a brief moment, Reva's expression shifted again, that small, almost smile returning. Lucas noticed it, and this time he didn't look away from it. "You know," he said more thoughtfully now, "for someone who spent 15 years tracking me down, you're handling this surprisingly calmly." "I am not calm," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because from my perspective, you're doing a great impression of it." She hesitated, then spoke more quietly. "I found you." Lucas blinked. Then he nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "You did." That seemed to be enough, for both of them. Another silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was full of everything that had been said, and everything that didn't need to be said anymore. Lucas shifted his stance, then let out a small breath. "All right," he said. "I think I've got a better understanding of the situation now." Reva inclined her head slightly. "And what is your conclusion?" He considered that for a moment. Then he gave a small, almost reluctant smile. "My conclusion," he said, "is that maybe I've been wrong about a few things." Reva didn't respond immediately, but her gaze held steady on him. Lucas looked at her again, more certain now. "Maybe what we do doesn't just disappear," he continued. "Maybe it sticks around, in ways we don't see." "It does," she said. He nodded. "And maybe," he added, "sometimes the people you help remember you better than you remember yourself." Reva's expression softened, just slightly. "Yes," she said. Lucas exhaled, something in his posture easing, like a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying had finally shifted. "All right," he said quietly. "I can work with that." He glanced down at the empty cup in his hand, then back at her. "So," he said, a hint of humor returning, "what's next?"